I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin this hour at the White House, where later today, President Trump will unveil a new package of what he calls reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners around the world. The specific details of Mr. Trump's tariffs are still unclear, but the White House says the new duties will come into effect immediately after the president announces his plans this afternoon. This is in addition to that separate 25% tariff on auto imports, which is due to take effect tomorrow.
The tariffs are likely to spark global retaliation, deepening a trade war that could have a major impact on the world economy and financial markets. But the Trump administration says the new tariffs are aimed at boosting U.S. manufacturing and hitting back at alleged unfair trading practices. Here's how the White House press secretary responded yesterday when asked by a reporter if the president is sure these measures will work.
They're not going to be wrong. It is going to work. And the president has a brilliant team of advisors who have been studying these issues for decades. And we are focused on restoring the golden age of America and making America a manufacturing superpower.
Here to talk more about all this, NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake and NBC's business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Good morning to both of you. Garrett, let's start with you. I mean, what can you tell us about what the president is expected to announce later today? We still don't really know all the details, right?
No, Joe, it's striking to hear the press secretary make that promise because even as she was discussing how she's certain these measures will work, the measures themselves were undecided. The White House trade team was still meeting late yesterday to try to nail down exactly what specifically they will be rolling out today at 4 o'clock, notably after the markets close, to keep the president's promise to try to balance out these unfair trade practices he sees around the world. Broadly speaking, there are a couple of options in front of them. They can place sort of country-specific tariffs on goods, all goods coming from individual countries that the White House has said would be global, not just focused on some of the most egregious or most unbalanced trade partners that the U.S. has around the world. Or they can target the tariffs more specifically to specific goods and specific industries that come out of these countries. As we're looking for clues around the world for what exactly will be in this package, I can tell you the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said yesterday that what gets announced today will essentially be the high water mark for these tariffs, and that it's possible that the ultimate rates could be negotiated back down over time. But as we stand here this morning, it's not clear whether a final decision has been made by the president about what will be in this package or exactly what is in that final decision. It's striking given the market-moving nature of what we're expected to see announced today, Joe.
And Brian, let's bring you in here in addition, as we mentioned, to this announcement we're waiting on. We've got these auto tariffs. You spent all day yesterday at a car dealership.
Yeah.
How are consumers feeling about this, and what will be the real-life impact immediately when you go try to buy a car?
Yeah, well, consumers that we talk to, as well as people that work at the dealership, were telling us that there is this kind of questioning out there among people who, by the way, when it comes to buying a car, it's a major big-ticket purchase. In many cases, they're budgeting out for years to make that buy. And they're all saying, look, I don't know when the tariffs will take effect. I don't know when the prices will increase, and I don't know what the magnitude of those price increases will be. But you have Goldman Sachs and some other Wall Street banks that are projecting for a foreign car, prices could go up by as much as $15,000 as a result of that 25% tariff, which is separate from what Garrett was talking about and will be announced today. It was announced by the White House last week, but it will take effect tonight into tomorrow morning. But again, it could be weeks, not months, is what we're hearing based off of industry sources for those prices to begin increasing on vehicles, on consumers. So if you are looking at buying a car and we're already going to buy a car, it might not hurt to go out sooner rather than later and make that purchase.
The Trump administration is clearly projecting confidence about this. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro estimates they would net our economy, these tariffs, between $600 and $700 billion a year. Has he explained what shape those numbers take, and what are economists saying about all of this?
Well, I mean, Joe, just like the actual contours of the tariffs themselves, it's really unclear about exactly how the money would be taken in as part of these tariffs. And I want to point out as well that the tone has noticeably shifted as well. When we first talked about the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which were stayed for a month, they would be reintroduced effective whatever the announcement would be today. But that was a fentanyl conversation. They were saying this is not a trade war. This is about the drug war and stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Haven't heard that much about that recently. And now it's all about the money that we would get as a result of these tariffs. How is that kind of threaded through the needle? We'll have to see based off of the announcement later on today.
All right, Brian, thank you. Garrett, also last night, I do want to ask you, we're obviously seeing pushback to this, including from New Jersey's Democratic Senator Cory Booker breaking the record for the longest ever Senate speech. It was over 25 hours. Tell us about what he had to say.
Yeah, look, Democrats have wanted to see their elected representatives in Washington fight back against Donald Trump more. There are very, very few tools available to elected Democrats in the minority, but one of them is to hold the floor for as long as possible. Cory Booker took that to the maximum extent possible, breaking the record for the longest modern Senate speech, casting opposition to a variety of Trump policies in moral terms, essentially as a fight of good versus evil. He even sort of cast the tariffs and the economic picture in that same framework. Listen to a very small excerpt of a very long speech from Senator Booker.
What does his Liberation Day mean to the people that are shackled to debt? From medical debt, that are shackled with student debt, that can't afford the rising costs of groceries. What does his liberation mean to people who can't afford homes because of his tariffs, who dreamed of a new car, but that's going to go up as well?
What you're seeing there, I think, is a preview of how you'll see Democrats push back against this tariff announcement today if indeed prices go up, contrasting Donald Trump's lofty language about liberation with the on-the-ground reality of rising prices. Savannah, Joe?
And Garrett, no bathroom breaks, is that right?
No bathroom breaks. He couldn't even sit down, Joe. This is a very long time standing up. The senator, who's a vegan, said he did it without any kind of bathroom aid, let's say, other than dehydrating himself in advance to make sure he didn't have anywhere to be but the Senate floor.
Right, Garrett, Brian, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Something. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, voters in Wisconsin and Florida have cast their ballots in the first elections of President Trump's second term. NBC News projects that Democrat Susan Crawford has won a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, defeating former Republican Attorney General Brad Schimmel. Now, the win allows liberals to maintain their narrow majority in the state's highest court.
The race gained national attention after Trump advisor Elon Musk spent millions of dollars to oppose her. It became the most expensive state Supreme Court race in U.S. history. In Florida, Republican candidates came out on top in a pair of special congressional elections in the state, though their margins were smaller than Trump's margins in November. The win pads Republicans' small majority in the House of Representatives.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early on MSNBC, Ali Vitale, joins us with the latest here. Ali, let's begin with this big win for Democrats last night in Wisconsin and for Susan Crawford in this closely watched Supreme Court race. How big of a setback is that for President Trump and, by association, Elon Musk, especially after we saw him campaigning, giving out those $1 million checks there?
Yeah, I got to say, first of all, I love it when we get some early sense of the election music. That is, of course, my favorite. So here we are with that. But look, for folks in the White House, this is them digesting a big loss and Democrats trying to figure out if they have found a key for the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. Because you're right, this is technically a nonpartisan race for the state Supreme Court, but it had partisan players all over it, not least among them Elon Musk, who was there on the ground, not just putting in millions of dollars, but also sporting a cheese head. It doesn't get more Wisconsin politics than that. And trying to apply what he's doing with Doge, as well as what Republicans in Congress are allowing the Trump administration to do, directly into this state Supreme Court race that also had key issues in it, like abortion and like voting rights. All of those culminated in Democrats not just notching a win here, but doing so by a 10-point margin. So Democrats feeling like they've learned how to use Elon Musk in a political sense, and Republicans trying to figure out if Musk is someone who can drag them down in future contests.
So, Ali, let's talk about Florida, because you have two Republicans victorious in special congressional races there. They were expected to win. That's not the surprise. The real question was the margins, right?
The margins and how. So you look at the fact that both of these Republicans were able to keep their seats, but they did so by half of the margin that their Republican predecessors had done in 2024. Now, there's a few reasons for that. Turnout in off-year elections is always difficult to predict. When you have Trump on the ballot, as you did in 2024, especially in his adopted home state, that certainly helps bring turnout up, and that might have helped Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz, who were the people that held these seats prior, to win by as large margins as they did. But look, Florida is red, especially when you look at that Florida 1st congressional district. It's in the panhandle of the state, much more conservative area, consistently so. And so the fact that they won by half of the margins, not a 30-point margin, but more of like a 14, 15-point margin, it's notable for Democrats and Republicans alike.
Allie, also, we want to ask you about Senator Cory Booker as well. This 25 plus hours, no bathroom breaks, fun fact there. Do you think this is a moment that Democrats can build off of?
This is the fight that many in the grassroots are asking lawmakers to show. And so Booker going on the Senate floor like that, not just talking in the ways that Garrett mentioned about the policies of the Trump administration and casting them as good versus evil, but also notching a record here and putting himself in the congressional record books, doing so in a way that might remind viewers that the arc of the universe does bend towards justice and progress. The man who he replaced at the top of the list of longest Senate floor speeches was Strom Thurmond, a Southern senator who at that point used his remarks to rail against integration. He was a pro-segregationist, a racist, and so Booker being able to unseat him there and saying that he stands on that Senate floor able to make this history in spite of members like Strom Thurmond. So a nice cap there. And also, I got to say, I want to see this guy's Oura Ring data as an Oura Ring wearer myself. His office says he's going to release it, so I got to see that.
All right. Big breaking news there. Allie, real quick, we should talk about what happened in the House. It was actually a big defeat yesterday for Speaker Mike Johnson. A group of House Republicans sank an effort by Johnson trying to kill a plan that would allow remote voting for lawmakers who become new parents. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this is a battle over proxy voting. Basically, can you assign another member to vote for you while you are out on either maternity leave or other things? And this is something that Republican Anna Paulina Luna of Florida was pushing. She had support from Democrat Brittany Peterson and others. But ultimately, Johnson tried to get rid of this effort. He's not a fan of proxy voting. Republicans then coming to the aid of Democrats and helping to defeat this move by the Speaker. It's a stunning rebuke by Republicans of their leadership, not the kind of thing that you see often. And because of it, Johnson basically said, OK, I'm going to turn this legislative car around. No more votes this week. They have to come back this next week, though, and deal with it because of the amount of support that it has. It's not a fight that's over.
All right. Allie Vitale, thank you very much.
April is off to a stormy start for much of the country. Storms swept through the Midwest and South, and now millions are at risk for severe weather today. Tornadoes, heavy rain, life-threatening flash flooding are expected to continue, stretching from Texas all the way up to Michigan. This new round of weather comes on the heels of a storm system that killed at least 7 people, battering parts of the Midwest and the South. It spawned several possible tornadoes like this one in Alabama. It's not just storms. Parts of the southern Rockies and high plains are dealing with an increased fire danger because of dry conditions and gusty winds.
Let's get a closer look at what to expect from these severe storms with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. A couple of busy days ahead of us, and we've already ramped things up this morning. It's only going to increase here as we get through the later parts of today and specifically in the next couple of days when it comes to flooding concerns. But those severe storms off to a quick start this morning. We've got tornado watches in effect for much of Oklahoma, a sliver of Kansas, parts of Missouri, and a little bit of the northwest corner of Arkansas. That's going to last until noon Central Time, and you can see why. Plenty of thunderstorm warnings as well, with this line of thunderstorms marching its way to the east. This is going to continue shifting to the east through the day today. Of course, we'll get some of that kind of daytime heating going, and we've got a really expansive area that we're looking at for severe weather today. And this is nothing to blink at. We've got a moderate risk for areas like Little Rock, El Dorado, Nashville into that enhanced risk. But take a look at the pink, that high risk, Memphis to Paducah. That is a location that we're looking at to see a good chance for us to see some of these large EF3 multiple long track tornadoes. And it's for a good chunk of the country. Again, Indianapolis, Lexington, Nashville, Memphis, Little Rock, all major cities that are included in this. But the risk extends up into Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Springfield, Tyler, all included in that here as we get through the later parts of today. Now, the problem is we're going to continue to see this kind of same system stuck in a way. And that means that we've got severe risk for a good chunk of the country again for tomorrow. So 42 million people, Washington, D.C. to Dallas, dealing with the hail. That'll be the main threat. And then as we get into Friday, more of the same similar areas that are under these severe risks, Texas basically extending into the Midwest. That is just one of the impacts that we're concerned about here as we go through the next couple of days. Once we get through the severe weather, we've got the potential to see a very impressive, life-threatening flooding situation occurring for really the same spots that are dealing with the severe weather. So not only could some locations see the potential for EF3 or EF4 tornadoes, tornadoes to occur, but they also will see torrential rain happening over multiple days in the same spot. And we're looking at significant flooding because of that. So, guys, we already have these flood alerts up for 33 million people. These are going to last through Sunday. We've got flash flood risks for the next couple of days. And by the time this is all said and done, we could see up to 15 inches of rain across this region. This is really concerning. People definitely need to be staying weather aware over the next few days.
Certainly. Thank you, Angie.
You got it.
Today, Hollywood is mourning the loss of one of its most versatile actors. Actor Val Kilmer, known for playing iconic roles, Batman, Jim Morrison. He died yesterday from pneumonia. He was just 65 years old.
Kilmer rose to fame playing Iceman, the rival to Tom Cruise's Maverick, in the 1986 classic Top Gun. He went on to become one of the top-paid actors of the 1990s, someone who could play the good guy and the bad guy. Kilmer later shared his life story in a documentary that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2021.
I see myself as a sensitive, intelligent human being, but with the soul of a clown.
Now, despite battling health issues, he returned to the screen one final time 3 years ago, reprising his role as Iceman in Top Gun Maverick shortly after Kilmer's death was announced last night. Actor Josh Brolin posted this tribute to his friend, writing, quote, "You were a smart, challenging, brave, uber creative firecracker. There's not a lot of those."
Not a lot left of those. I
stumbled
stumbled over that earlier today, too. It was strange wording. Entertainment journalist and pop culture expert Brian Balthazar joins us now with more on this. Brian, 65 is so young, but we do know he was having health struggles. He was battling cancer. He had a procedure on his trachea that really made it so that he couldn't act much anymore. I mean, talk about his life more recently.
Right. So we do know that as you mentioned, in 2014, he had cancer. We don't know exactly what led to today, except that his daughter, Mercedes, is saying that he had pneumonia. Now, pneumonia can creep up with people who have immune-compromised systems as well as respiratory problems. And he had 2, as you said, tracheotomies to treat his throat cancer, radiation, chemotherapy. So he's really been through it. He was really private about his illness for many years until that documentary that you referred to. But this is a man who came back in that Top Gun Maverick movie. His voice had to be digitally recreated to improve the sound of his voice, and that was really an iconic moment because that is, as you said, the film that he really became known for back in his early days of his career as Iceman in the original film starring Tom Cruise in 1986. And really what a career he's had, more than 80 roles between film and television over the course of his life.
And in 1992, the famous film critic Roger Ebert, he wrote specifically about him. He said, if there's an award for the most unsung leading man of his generation, Kilmer should get it. Let's talk about some of those leading roles. What were some of his best performances?
Right. Well, you mentioned unsung, and that's because he never was nominated for a Golden Globe or an Oscar in the course of his career. Some of the most amazing roles, one of them obviously playing Jim Morrison in The Doors in 1991. And in 1993, he played Doc Holliday in Tombstone, another one of those roles. These 2 roles in particular are where we heard some of the stories of his reputation as a method actor. And for those people who don't know what method acting is, they immerse themselves in the role so much so. In the case of The Doors, he insisted on being called Jim Morrison. Jennifer Tilly tells the story that even at the audition, there was sort of a cattle call for some of the supporting players. He pulled up in a car, shirtless and in leather pants, with his hair wild and music blaring. And she said, from that moment on, we knew there was no one else that could play him. He insisted on being called Jim during the course of shooting. And in the movie Tombstone, his character dies of tuberculosis. So he had set dressers fill his bed with ice, the bed that he would be dying in, so that he could replicate the shivering and weird feelings that come from being frigidly cold, and he said it was quite effective, and it was one of the roles that people remember him for.
It truly is. There were pros and cons to what you mentioned. After working together on the island of Dr. Moreau in '96, the director said there were 2 things he would never do again: climb Mount Everest and work with Val Kilmer. I mean, that's part of the story of Val Kilmer. He was tough to work with.
It is, and he even and he came to accept that later in his life. In the documentary, I think there's really a pretty spot-on quote where he says, "I have behaved poorly, I have behaved bravely, I have behaved bizarrely to some. I deny none of this and have no regrets because I have lost and found parts of myself that I never knew existed, and I am blessed." And what a way to summarize an incredible career ranging that started out as comedy in Top Secret and went on to be Top Gun and really left a great impression on theater goers for decades.
That's what makes you an icon. There you go. Brian, thank you so much for joining us this morning for this look back. All right.
Thank you.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, changing the game. The NFL announcing a series of new rules for this coming season. What fans need to know.
Up first, the developing news out of the Middle East as Israeli forces intensify their ground assault on the Gaza Strip. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.